Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the day. I am so excited to be joining y'all, and I'm so excited to be able to introduce this next speaker. Um, but a little bit about me. I am Brittany Brown, Senior Community Engagement Manager at Ninja One. So I kind of help with all things content, Discord, and then also building our new IT leadership community. And I get to replace Jonathan for the next couple of days. And I'm really excited that Ninja One is able to sponsor such a great event. So, what I'm going to go ahead and do is introduce you to our final speaker of the day. So, Chris Sanders is the founder and executive director of the Rural Tech Fund, whose goal is to fight generational poverty by introducing underprivileged kids to the potential of technology based jobs. Um, and I know I probably missed a lot in there because there's a lot that goes into an effort like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just hand it over to Chris so that he can share his story, his mission, and then the importance of introducing rural communities to the broader world of tech.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate the introduction and your sponsorship of the event. A big shout out to the folks who are running the event, who invited us here. Rejection Con for partnering with us to donate proceeds to the mission and the work that we're doing. I'm super excited to be talking with you all today. And honestly, I know there's a lot of ways that you could spend your Wednesday afternoon. I appreciate you spending the next 30 minutes or so with me. As Brittany said, my name is Chris Sanders. My background is actually in cybersecurity, and before that in IT. I know a lot of you joining us today are from the MSP side. I actually got my start at some point working at an MSP in rural Western Kentucky. I saw a lot of different sides of IT and security that I don't think a lot of people get to see or have enough empathy for. So I'm glad to have a lot of folks from that crowd, that audience talking here today. My primary day job is I run a company called Applied Network Defense. We do cybersecurity training online. But I also run the Rural Technology Fund, and that's really the thing I'm here to talk to you about today. A quick overview of the RTF. Basically, our goal is to help introduce kids in public schools, rural public schools, to the potential of technology, jobs, and all that can offer them. We do that in a couple of ways. The primary way we do that is by partnering with teachers in these schools and also in public libraries, give them the equipment and things they need to teach kids about computer science and engineering and aerospace and all these sorts of jobs in the innovation sector. So we're talking about things like 3D printers or Raspberry Pis or Arduinos or robotics kits, lots of different things. Along with that, we also provide some college scholarships to kids from rural areas who are pursuing these tech careers. And we work to provide assistive technology devices to kids with physical disabilities so that they can access technology like everyone else. So today I want to talk to you about, well, a few things, primarily rural poverty, but I want to start out with talking about a little bit why I'm here. And really why I'm here is because I was kind of that kid in school. I think a lot of people watching this today were probably that kid. And by that kid, I mean, I was that kid who was a bit nerdy. I kind of kept to myself. I was more interested in fiddling around with computers and tech and creating and building things than I was a lot of the other things that I probably should have been doing. Maybe my grades weren't as good as they could have been because of that. This is actually a picture of me getting my first computer. This talking Computron was really just a glorified speak and spell. It wasn't really a computer, but I sure thought it was. And that was pretty cool to me. So all that to say, I was able to have quite a bit of success in life and do some pretty neat things and see some neat places and meet some neat people. But a lot of that was simply because I was lucky. I want to talk a little bit about that luck and how we're trying to create some of the luck for other folks. The title of the talk today is Poverty Charges Interest. And what we're going to talk about today is poverty, but particularly rural poverty and kind of why that exists and some of the things we can do to fight that kind of on an individual and community level scale. So we're going to talk a little bit about a place, a person, and a cause. And we're going to start out with the place. And the place is Mayfield, Kentucky. It's my hometown. This is a picture of it. It unfortunately looks quite a bit different now. A tornado came through and wrecked a lot of what you see there a few years back. But this is Mayfield. It's a very small town, only about 9,500 folks. We have all we need, right? Like if you look closely at the picture, you can see a Walmart in the background. We have a Waffle House. There are some schools. So we got the basics covered. Now, I loved growing up in Mayfield. There were a lot of great things there, but Mayfield had a lot of poverty, right? You see there that our poverty rate was over twice the US average, and the average household income was pretty darn low. That said, it didn't used to always be like that in Mayfield. Mayfield was a very thriving town for a while. And the reason is because, like a lot of small rural communities post World War II, we had industry jobs, we had factory jobs, we built things, right? We built things like the Ingersoll Rand plant made air compressors, and we had a tire factory, and we had wool mills, things of that nature. And of course, these were all places and jobs that were higher paying, right? And that's a pretty cool thing. Those higher paying jobs helped establish the community, not because of those jobs themselves, but also because of the other jobs that they created. These are what we call local service sector jobs. So we're talking about things like nurses and doctors and plumbers and electricians and construction workers and retail workers, all the things that pop up in a community to support the other jobs that have been brought there. Now, the thing we know from economic research is that these jobs, whenever an industry or an engineering, or excuse me, a manufacturing job comes into a town, it creates around 1.6 local service jobs. We call that the multiplier effect. So we have these high paying manufacturing jobs, and they create these other jobs. And that kind of helps everybody out, raises the community up, and it makes sure everybody has enough money to eat and do the things that they need to do. But like a lot of other rural towns, I think many of us know how this story kind of goes, is that the jobs eventually started leaving, right? Part of that is the result of automation. Part of it is a result of cheaper labor overseas, right? Globalization, right? And we can't run from globalization. These jobs are not going to come back, not in the capacity that they were in. And the result of this is it takes a town like Mayfield, which was really thriving at some point, and it kind of makes it descend into poverty. It increases the poverty level. The high paying jobs are gone. The service sector jobs that still exist, because you still need to serve the people, are going to pay less because people can't afford to pay the higher cost of living there. We don't often think about rural areas as having a high cost of living, but when you don't have a good job, it certainly is the case. So the thing is here is what you find, and we talk about poverty charging interest, is that once you enter into a state of poverty, it becomes exponentially harder to get out of it. So when we think about poverty charging interest, the thing I want you to think about here is the idea that, well, let's say you have a toothache, right? And your tooth kind of hurts. Well, going to the dentist is expensive, right? You have to take time off work. You have to go. You have to get looked at. There's a cost associated with it. So maybe it'll fix itself, but then it doesn't, and then it turns into an extraction or a root canal. So what was going to be a couple $100s to fix now is going to be maybe a couple thousand. Let's say your heating or your air conditioning on your house is on the fritz a little bit. It's not as efficient as it was. Maybe it's making a rattling sound. You want to get that looked at, but again, it's going to cost money to have it looked at. It's going to require you to take off work to meet the person there who's looking at the contractor. That costs money, time, and monetary dollars. So what could have been maybe a couple $100 fix gets worse and worse and worse until you're having to replace the whole unit. Let's say one of your key appliances goes out. Let's say your refrigerator goes out. We have to have a refrigerator. We have to have food. It goes out. So, buying a new one's pretty expensive. Maybe you get a used one instead, which is going to go out again more frequently than a new one. Maybe you have to buy one that's a much lower cost, a cheaper brand. Maybe you have to take a payday loan, or maybe you have to go to one of those rent to own places. They're going to charge you actual interest, monetary interest on it, right? So it's like every dollar that you don't have costs you two later. That's kind of what we're getting at in terms of when we speak of poverty and rural poverty. And it doesn't stop with actual money. It also relates to your time as well. Most folks who are living in rural poverty are working hourly jobs, which means they don't have paid time off. So when you have to do things like meet a contractor to fix something, or go to a doctor's appointment, or pick up your kids, you're losing money. You're effectively losing money to spend money in some ways, right? And this also is affected by commutes, right? Where the jobs are, it generally costs more to live closer to those places. So you end up living further out. And we're talking about rural communities where maybe you have one kind of city center, county seat type place, and then you're maybe living 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes away from the place you're working at. So that's increasing the cost to get to where you want to go. And it's also taking your time away for doing other things. People in rural areas tend to commute a lot longer than people in urban areas for all of these reasons. Now, those are the kind of the physical cost and the time cost, but what about kind of the mental cost of existing in poverty, right? I tend to think of poverty being something of a full-time job, because you're asking yourself questions like, Do I stretch my medication or do I skip it altogether? Do I push my teen to take a job or let them do an extracurricular? We know that the extracurriculars are probably going to be better for them, but maybe they have to contribute around the house because that's the only way we can get by. Do I take this new job or stay at home with my child because I can't afford the daycare? I know lots of people in this situation who their work would only have them making maybe a few $1,000s extra a year from what the cost of daycare is, right? That's something that's very expensive. And then we get to questions like, do I sleep or do I try to pick up another shift, try to get a little bit ahead or a little less behind? It's a lot of decisions. And these are decisions that are constantly being weighed when you are living in poverty. It creates decision fatigue. It has horrible effects on our mental health, and that can lead to all sorts of horrible things. And these things are all inherent to living in poverty and living in a rural area where poverty is much more likely to exist. I want to throw some statistics at you here. If you live in a rural area, you are 13% more likely to overdose from prescription drugs. You are 17% more likely to be disabled. You are 33% more likely to become unemployed. You're 40% more likely to develop heart disease. You are 45% more likely to experience domestic violence. And you are 62% more likely to die from suicide. Now, these are all statistics, but these statistics are people. I've been affected by all of these statistics in some way. So we've talked a little bit about a place. So let's talk about a person. And no surprise, that person is me. This is the house I grew up in Mayfield, Kentucky. I spent my entire childhood in this house. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was a trucker and my grandmother was a sewing machine operator, and we lived in poverty. Um, we didn't live in as much poverty as some other folks around us, but by all abject standards, we lived in poverty. This house was about 800 square feet. Our cabinets were plywood. My dad had built them. My walls growing up were unpainted particle board from a room my dad had built. And this house sold at auction about 10 years ago for $14,000. So it was an interesting way to grow up. But I will say, as a kid, a lot of that was kind of lost on me, right? As a kid, you're kind of blissfully ignorant of some of these things, right? I was living my best late 80s, early 90s life, taking pictures at the McDonald's with my Karate Kid headband, and just, we were poor, but so was everybody else around us. And there were certainly people that were more poor than we were to some degree. So this is kind of a snapshot of my early life. And I mentioned that I was, kind of raised by my grandparents, but my grandfather was a trucker. So I was raised by women. I was raised by strong women, and these are three of them. My in the middle there is my grandmother Judy. On the right is my Aunt Buzzy. No, that's not her real name. That's what we called her. And then on the bottom left there was my mom, Kim. So wonderful women who are all living kind of in this type of poverty, right? There were these manufacturing jobs that just weren't available to them anymore. So they were doing jobs that kind of barely got us by. So in terms of poverty, charge, and interest, and when I talk about statistics, this is where this kind of comes into play to me. When I was 15, my grandmother died of heart disease. A couple months later, my aunt there in the picture, she died very, very similarly. A couple years later, my mom, Kim, died of a suicide from drug overdose. Poverty, charged interest, and the payments came due, more or less. There's a lot of circumstances and things that lead to that, but ultimately, it's a lack of opportunity, which was what got us here in some ways. So, that's the sadder part of my story. But I'm obviously here talking to you today. So to some degree, I have avoided this fate. At least I have so far, right? My biological mom, Kim, she died. She was the same age I am now when she died. And I'm fortunate that I'm able to be doing a whole lot better. But how is that? How was I able to avoid that fate? And you probably guessed it. It's to some degree because I found tech and computers and computing and that career path. And that led me out of generational poverty and universe willing, we've ended that cycle with my family, right? That's generally the hope here. But we're all a product of where we came from to some degree. And even my success in being able to get into computing was to some degree, in part because of Mayfield, Kentucky, and where I'm from. So if you know a lot about agriculture, so in West Kentucky, we grow corn. And when you grow corn, it takes nitrogen out of the soil and you need to put nitrogen back into the soil. And one of the ways you do that is with anhydrous ammonia, which is a key ingredient in meth. And so when people ask me how I got into computers, I always tell them it's because my brother Billy built a meth lab. I recognize that sounds a little crazy, but my brother Billy, he was kind of an innovative guy, and he figured out there was all this anhydrous laying around, and he figured out that you could steal this anhydrous and use it to make meth. So he did that, and as you do when you do that sort of thing, he got caught and went to prison. When he went to prison, he took a class on computers. Pretty neat. He eventually got out of prison, was on house arrest at my Aunt Buzzy's house. We would go over there. I would see him fiddling around with this computer he had. And I thought that was the most fascinating thing ever, right? You could create things and you could write code and do things. You could manipulate components and make it run faster. You could play games on it. That's pretty neat. So I kind of caught the bug that way. And so I started hobbling together parts and eventually was able to build my first computer. This is not the exact computer, but it looked pretty much exactly like this. It was a 386. This is probably throwing some people back to their childhood, pressing the turbo button to increase the front side bus speed, all those things. Yeah, so this was how I got into computers. And eventually that would lead me to, in my high school, my teachers would notice that, hey, this kid's pretty good at computers. Maybe he can help us with ours. And they would ask me to help them. And I would do that. And eventually they gave me course credit for it. And eventually when it was time to go to college, I couldn't afford it. But my school district said, hey, why don't you come work for us? You can be our first network administrator. It's a lot cheaper than the contractors we're paying now. And you can use that to pay your way through college. And honestly, because I had a few teachers who really cared about me, that set me on a path that led me and my family out of the generational poverty that it had been so affected by before, right? So I want to be clear here. I did a lot of, I work hard and continue to work hard, but I was also an exception to the rule. And I was an exception in that kids from rural areas, it's a lot harder for them to not so much get out, but at least get out of generational poverty and better themselves in that way. And a lot of that was luck, right? Hard work was a factor, but a lot of it was luck. Some of it's privilege, but a lot of it is luck. And I'm incredibly fortunate to have a few teachers who really cared about me and pressed me. And they didn't know what to do from the computing standpoint. They didn't know how to help me get the knowledge that I thirsted for as it pertained to computers. But they did at least keep me on the straight and narrow and keep me from falling off the path in a number of different ways. So I was able to go on and have some success as that kid from my school. So that was kind of the individual story. But what about the collective story? So with my success, I was able to travel quite a bit around the US and see a lot of different types of poverty in rural areas. And the thing I saw, I kind of sum up as this, is that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. There were a lot of, I said I was that kid. There were a lot of those kids in different schools all over the country, right? A lot of them didn't have the same luck that I did. And like me, many of them had almost no opportunity to do anything with it. And so what I started thinking about around 2008 was the idea of, well, how do I leverage this and leverage some of the things I was able to do and help others create success in similar ways? And it goes back to some of the economics that I talked about earlier. You'll remember I said that for every manufacturing job that comes to a community, it creates 1.6 local service jobs. Well, let's think about that in terms of innovation sector jobs. So when I say innovation sector, I mean things like what most of us on this presentation do. So tech jobs, engineering, biomed, clean tech, aviation, aerospace, robotics, those types of jobs. We call that the innovation sector. And of course, these jobs are generally high paying jobs. And what we know about these jobs is that when you bring an innovation sector job into a community, it creates 5 local service jobs, right? So not only is it lifting up the individual, and we're talking about an individual here who can make a pretty good salary and also often work remotely in their local community. They're now spending that money in that community, right? And that's creating these other jobs. So generally speaking, I believe that technology jobs and innovation jobs have the power to both transform and get individuals out of generational poverty, but also to lift up entire rural communities, many of which are struggling tremendously. We have to give rural students the opportunity. And I think by giving them access and letting them know that these tech jobs are a potential for them, we do that. So as we get close to wrapping up here, I want to just zoom in on a few of the towns and the work that we've done. And I'll say here that the students that I'm going to show you and focus on were actually partially funded. The projects we did were funded by the last Rejection Con, right? So I know we're asking folks to donate, and part of the ticket sales are coming to the Rural Tech Fund. So these are, if you were a part of the last Rejection Con, some of the things I'm going to show you are tangible results and opportunities we've created with your donations. And I want to start that by talking about Round Top, Texas. As you can see, not quite the most populous city. I tell people we specialize in the middle of nowhere because the middle of nowhere to someone is the center of the universe for someone else, just like Mayfield, Kentucky was for me. So in Round Top, the schools didn't really have any STEM or technology classes available to students, but we had a librarian as part of their public library who wanted to build a STEM program. And public libraries are great. If you haven't been yours recently, you should really check them out. I think libraries are the new makerspace, and they're probably a lot different now than they were when you were kids, and they certainly need your support. So we had this librarian who wanted to build a STEM program. So we hooked her up with a few different things, including Lego robotics kits. So what we have here is students who now have a STEM day. So about once a month, different classes will go to the library and they'll have this STEM day and they learn about robotics. And they're doing things like engineering, both individually and collaboratively. They're doing block-based coding at the younger levels and Python-based coding at the upper levels. And they're learning about opportunities that they never knew existed. You see, they built some robots here. One of them is carrying some water and moving it around. You see a kid coding with the block-based coding system there. Really, really neat. What we found are programs like this are also, not only do they get kids who never even knew technology was a possibility interested in it, but it also finds that kid, like I was that kid, and helps push them a little bit further. In this case, there was an 8th grader this year who kind of already had the technology bug and was kind of leaps and bounds beyond other folks. So the librarian got him involved and had him start coming in and teaching other kids about technology, right? So here he is showing them more about the Lego Vex robotics kit and Vex robotics kits that we gave them. And we even brought in a PC and started teaching them about how to build it. So you disassembled it, let them build it, get hands-on themselves. And now you have a bunch of kids who knew maybe very little about how computers worked, building their own computers and seeing their eyes lights up. And these are pretty young kids who are doing this, right? We're talking elementary school age. Really impressive stuff. So not only were we able to introduce new kids to the technology and the jobs and the opportunities, but also finding that kid and pushing them a little bit further and giving them the things they need to thrive. Pretty cool. Ultimately, I talk a lot about that kid and being that kid. That's not just about technology. I think we need folks who understand technology and are good at technology, not just for tech's sake, but also combining other things. We need kids who are good at technology and arts and humanities and policy, right? We need more of those types of kids too. And it all kind of centers back into this early exposure that we do. The next town I'll talk about is Fruitport, Michigan. One of the things I find when you go to a lot of these small towns is they often have really neat water towers. Right? Like there's one in Kentucky that says Florence, y'all, and that's really neat. There's one in South Carolina that's supposed to be a giant peach. I think it kind of looks like a butt, but it's supposed to be a peach. And then you have this one, which is my personal favorite in Fruitport, Michigan. I don't think I could ever be in Fruitport, Michigan without being happy because of this water tower. I want this water tower any place I ever live. It's amazing. So in Fruitport, Michigan, we had a teacher, Alexia Davis, who she had a lot of kids who were asking and interested in electricity, and they had a lot of interesting questions about how electricity worked and how it made things do the things that they do. So she got to researching and found that snap circuits exist and reached out to us and asked us to fund a project related to snap circuits. So that's what we did. If you're not familiar with snap circuits, they are basically kind of kid-oriented circuitry. And so kids can build circuits, even relatively complex ones, without breadboards and soldering and the potential of like shocking themselves. They're really neat. They're really accessible to a lot of young ages too. My son is just turning 6 and he's been using them for about a year now. So she introduced these snap circuits, and within, no joke, within 2 days, the kids had moved past everything in the book that came with it and were building their own circuits. They were building relatively complex things. And we were talking about things that have different types of input sensors, play sounds. They'll spin a helicopter blade and launch it off, things like that. So they're getting exposed and understanding and being able to explore their curiosity, understand how electricity works, and pivot that into other applications within kind of this innovation sector. Really neat work in the kind of the K through 5th range there. So the last classroom I'll talk about is in Shade Gap, Pennsylvania. And this is part of a new project we launched this year. It's called Infinite Sky. So what we did here is we partnered with an organization called Teachers in Space. And we worked, this year we chose 5 classrooms and we sent them everything they need in the curriculum and helped them build satellites, CubeSats, we'll call them cube-shaped satellites. They're really small. And basically they built those. They built kind of a spec one that had a standard sensor array on it. And then based upon the things they learned there, they added their own sensor and we kind of helped them along the path. So we're talking about an Arduino based system, not overly complex, but very interesting challenge to kids in this age range. So they built these CubeSats. The finished product looks something like this. They were able to customize them and make them look kind of neat. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take these next month. We actually have a few of these going up. We're hooking these up to a high altitude balloon and sending them into the stratosphere. So they're going to be on collecting data. These students are conducting experiments. They're going to go up into the stratosphere, come back down, and the students will get the data and be able to analyze it, right? The kids thought this was so exciting. This particular classroom, they actually had a special event just to put it in the mailbox to send it off to us. They even had a video and they did a little countdown and put it in the mailbox. It was super cute. So they're going to be really excited when they watch the live stream and see this thing go off into the stratosphere. I don't know how many kids think it's possible to build something that actually gets sent off into space. I certainly didn't when I was a kid in Mayfield, Kentucky, and these kids probably didn't last year either, but now they know it's possible. And along the way, they're learning about programming and science and engineering and math and space and all the things that go along with it. And I just think that is just the coolest thing ever. So we're hoping to do many more classrooms like this as part of the Infinite Sky project next year. And this is all a lot more cost affordable than you think it might be. So as we get close to wrapping up here, talking a little bit about the Rural Tech Fund and what we do, I always said that we always wanted to measure our impact, not on the amount of money we spend or the press conferences we have. We wanted it to be based on the number of students we impacted, the number of students we helped learn more about technology and computer science. And in 2008, pretty humble, right? Just one kid in Mayfield, Kentucky, in my hometown with a scholarship. And that continued to increase over time, 8 kids by 2010, big jump by 2012 when we started to work with individual classrooms and started expanding across the country, and that continued to grow and continued to grow, and that gets us to where we are today. And in 2025, we put technology resources into the hands of over 220,000 kids in over 800 schools in all 50 states. Name a state, we've been there, right? You can maybe find some places close to your hometown on this map. I'm really, really proud of the work that we've been able to do. And it's entirely we don't get government grants. We don't really get many grants at all. We're mostly funded by businesses and individuals, events like this one that are community driven and community led. So that's really how we operate. So kind of wrapping up here, I just want to kind of revisit 2 core concepts, right? The first is that poverty charges interest, right? If you're born into a rural area, you're much more likely to experience poverty. You are born into a debt. It is something, if you've ever experienced this, if you were born in poverty, no matter how much success you have, you will always feel like you are being chased by something. Like everything you have could be taken away in a moment, because that's what living in poverty is like. It can happen just that easily, right? And you never quite fully escape that. So really the reason the Rural Tech Fund exists is simply we want to help these kids, these students who are living in generational poverty. We want them to understand the opportunities that exist, the jobs that they can have, the things that they can do that maybe they didn't realize they could do before. We want them to get out of poverty before that debt comes due, before someone comes collecting, right? Like it did for my mom and my grandmother and my aunt and countless other members of my family and people I know and people maybe you knew too. I'll say it again, talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. We can fix that. There's enough people who care, there's enough resources available to fix that and lift both individuals and communities up. And that is exactly what we are trying to do here. So that's really it. That's the message I have to share with you today. I hope it's been helpful. I hope you've learned some things. I want to give a big shout out again to the folks at Rejection Con for being such huge supporters of the work we've done, donating all the ticket sales, donating sponsor endorsements and things like that. All of you listening, it goes a tremendously long way. We're a 501c3 organization. Everything's tax deductible. You can check us out there. The QR code goes to the campaign page directly for Rejection Con, as well as the text thing there as well. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank y'all so much. And I hope you've enjoyed this today on this Wednesday afternoon.
Chris, unbelievable. Once again, man, it's so good just to see not just you join us and talk about your personal history, but it resonates. Like last year, it resonated with so many people. You're speaking to us. Like this is so many people rolling in through the comments of like, that was me. I came from that kind of background. My first question for you, if you don't mind me asking a few,
Go for it.
first of all, is where do you want to see the RTF go in the next 1 to 3 years? Like, what's your mid and long term vision for the RTF?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one is we want to keep continuing the course. We want to reach obviously more areas and more places. One of the things we find is that it's very difficult to get into some of these rural areas, like for them to even know that we exist. There's this
Right.
idea of navigational capital, right? The idea that, like many of us say, like I know when I was going to college, I didn't even know student loans were a thing that existed, right? I just didn't know. So there was nobody around me to tell me that. That's kind of what we have in a lot of these rural areas about these tech jobs and about opportunities for grants like this. And I tell you, when a teacher applies for a grant with us, they go to our website, they fill out a form. It's a pretty straightforward form. Oftentimes we've had people fill out a form on Monday and get a check by Friday, right? Like we're pretty efficient.
Wow.
We don't want to waste teachers' time. We love teachers and we value teachers. So we want to keep getting out into more of these areas. We also want to keep expanding to other areas of interest where the jobs are going to be. I think space is a big part of that. I talked about the Teachers in Space program. I think with all that's going on in space exploration and the potential there, other countries getting involved in that as well, and maybe entering a new space race. That's an area we're going to continue to pursue pretty aggressively and have opportunities and partnerships along that way as well.
I love that. I want to ask a question from my friend Net Lynch. Are there any plans to add life skills support to the kids as they grow into adulthood, like budgeting, home economics, to help them manage? What do you think about that? Any thoughts there?
That's not something necessarily that we work on too incredibly directly on the rural tech education side. However, I do think the work we do on the assistive technology side is very important. I didn't get a chance to talk about that as much, but assistive technology devices are effectively devices that help people with physical disabilities access technology in a way that they can use it and take it to its full advantage. And I mean, I think everybody on this call appreciates the fact that it is hard to exist in modern society without using technology, right? Whether it's for budgeting and all those different life skills. So, we basically donate these devices to kids and they have them and will carry them through life. And Claire Copps, who works with me, she's our COO. That's her specialization. It's what she did her doctoral dissertation on. And she's a big champion in that space. So I think a lot of providing opportunity to kids using technology means that all kids need to be able to use that technology. And that's something that we don't think about enough. The funding is often not there on the government side. So we're using things like screen readers and specialized keyboards and mice and screens and reader pens and things like that give those kids that level of access. So we're kind of approaching that from that angle.
I love it. Absolutely love it. One thing I think people might discount is, man, I can give $20. I can give $100. It's not much, but it is a lot. Look, one of the things, if y'all will check out that Gively link we sent you, $20 goes right into actually teaching kids, like you see it right here, electronics and circuitry skills. $50 goes into a STEM kit, like a kind of a maker kind of kit. $100 goes to a Raspberry Pi. 500 goes to a 3D printer. 1,000 can even go into like funding a maker space. Can you talk about the meaning of just even small donations, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. We track things pretty aggressively, and we know that the math is simple. For every $7 we raise, that's another kid that gets introduced to technology, right? And the reason is because we're generally approaching this in a school or public library setting, where kids are, we have modules or they're sharing equipment. So we'll buy robotics kits, and it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's a class. We'll have 2 or 3 of those kits, and the students are working on that collaboratively in a team. So it takes a very small amount of money to make a pretty large impact. We're also a pretty lean organization. I work for free. I don't draw a salary from the Rural Technology Fund, right? So we try to use the money very wisely. I've always been I've been this way. Again, growing up in poverty, you think about all the money you spend. I always hated spending money at nonprofits and seeing that like all the money went to the board or all the money went to marketing or little doodads or gizmos or whatever else. I didn't want to do that. So we're incredibly efficient with their money. All that information is very transparent, right? You can look up our 990 forms and our tax forms and things of that nature. So we really want the money to be impactful. And we want to say that when people donate to us, the vast, vast, vast majority of it is going into the classroom. So the smallest of donations make a big difference. And again, most of our funding comes from small donations.
I love that. So I just want to encourage y'all to please consider giving. Some of you already have as part of your registration fee. We asked a $25 or $50 suggested donation. But it really means a lot, and we're watching for it, and we'll shout you out and just say thank you if anyone's done that. Chris, one thing last year we raised, I think, just a little over 25,000 last year. Our goal is to hit this year. I know it's a huge goal, and we'll see if we can hit it. Y'all want to prove me right, prove me wrong, but this year our goal is 50,000. I know it's lofty. I know it's a lot. What does 50,000 do? If we could give 50,000 to the RTF, what does that do?
Well, it's a game changer, right? I mean, our budget is, we operate on a pretty lean budget, right? Our annual budget's something like $200 to $250,000 a year. So you can see what type of chunk that is. And I mean, you're asking me to do math in public, but if you divide 50,000 by 7, that's like 7,000 kids, right? Who are
That's
going to integrate
incredible.
to technology. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. Man, I'm excited about that. And last year, one of the ways we made that happen, and I think we're going to introduce this starting tomorrow, is the Rejection Con challenge of just basically saying. So last year, an MSP owner, Degley, I don't know if Degley's on,
He
Alvarez,
was, yeah.
yeah, so he jumped in and he just gave $1,000 out of nowhere. And we've actually had a few people do that. Derek Gabriel really being the
Yeah,
first to
Gabriel.
kick it off this year.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be 1,000, any amount. But with the challenge being 1,000, anyone that gives 1,000 or more, and we'll pop you onto the Rejection Con Challenge website. Just a really neat way to say thank you, a way for us just to show you love back. Bob, you got any questions for Chris?
No, just watching the presentation, the thing I kind of stuck out in my mind is with the way that funding's happening at the governmental levels. I just think about how much more important what you're doing is, Chris, right? I mean, because now these donations really are gonna, in some cases, maybe the only way you get money into the system to be able to use it, right?
You're right. There's a lot of fear in schools right now, particularly rural schools, because of what's going on with the Department of Education and what it means for funding in those areas. And let alone a lot of schools are funded by external grants and things that are ultimately government funded that have been cut recently. We're very fortunate that, we don't get really any government funding and that we haven't been affected by that. But it's a little bleak out there in the nonprofit space and in the school space. And there's a lot of fear and concern. So it's programs like ours that I think are going to be the ones that kind of shore that up until we can get things in a better shape, right? And I just think there's a lot of work to be done there, and it's easy to get down on it, but it's kind of reinvigorated me a little bit because I know the work is more important now than it's ever been.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
we just got to depend on each other. I mean, that's the way we got to look at it, right? So it's always been that way, but now the veil has been lifted. So we just got to get busy and roll our sleeves up and get to work. So I'm just
Well,
a
and I tell you, I
massive
think
fan.
the in the United States, we're a democracy and we're a free market economy, and neither of those things work if the people who have a little bit extra don't occasionally help out the folks that don't have quite enough, right? It's as simple as that. And there's a lot of ways to do that. This is not the only way, but this is one of those ways and a meaningful one.
I love it. I'm sending a link into chat, this Rural Tech Fund /impact. Go check that out. And I challenge you today. Is there a school nearby that you reckon? Well, maybe you won't know the school, but is there a tag nearby that you're like, whoa, that RTF is impacted right where I live? I'm in Tampa, and RTF has done. Like, I'm looking at Lakeland, one just north of Tampa, Bradenton, Claremont, Kissimmee, Brooksville. I mean, just where I live alone, a whole bunch of schools. Chris, I'm fascinated by $250,000 budget goes into hundreds of thousands of students over the years, goes into what are we looking at here, 850 plus schools. I'm just fascinated by that because I think sometimes we give $1, and you check out at the Publix. For me, it's like, do you want to give $2 to XYZ? And you're like, I don't even know if any of it's going to make an impact. This is direct impact right into school systems, and I just think there's something so noble about that.
Well, thank you. I think it's meaningful work, and I think most of the problems in life that we see both at an individual or a community or at a government level are most dramatically impacted when we invest in education of people at a young age and give them access to opportunities. And that's what we're trying to do.
We just had a donation come in, $500 from Rafi. Rafi, we
Thank
see
you.
you. Rafi, we know you. Rafi is an incredible human being. Thank you so much for that, Rafi. It really does mean the world to us. And just want to encourage everyone here. It doesn't matter, great or small. Any amount makes a difference. $7 to impact a student. I mean, how incredible is that? The next 2 days are going to be jam-packed with sessions. They're going to be jam-packed with really, really, really great content. You're going to have opportunities to continue to give and get creative with this. Spread the word to your peer groups. Spread the word to your community groups, to Facebook and Reddit and other places. Challenge others to give. challenge others to say, hey, will you put something in? Go pick your favorite vendor that's out there and go literally call them out by name and say, we want to see y'all give. I mean, why not? It's a 501c3. It's tax deductible and a great way to put their name onto something, proving that we really care about the communities that we serve inside of. Chris, any final parting comments for us? Anything else that you'd like to share with our group?
No, I think you hit most of it. Thank you so much. I will say on the teacher side of things, I mean, we're talking a lot about here about donations and funding these things. If you know a teacher who is struggling to get the resources they need to teach computer science or adjacent things within their school district, send them to our website. The application process, again, is incredibly simple. They can probably fill it out in one sitting. We look at all of those. I individually and Claire, we go through every single one of those. We have a lot more projects than we're able to fund, unfortunately, because we are funding limited, but we go through all of them, and there's a lot of opportunity there. And I like to think we're not quite like other grant giving programs, because we're not just going to wear the teacher out with all these extra steps that they have to do. We value teachers, and we want to give them the things they need to help the kids. So if you know a teacher like that in your rural community, send them our way. That's what we're here for.
I love it. I love it. If you guys will use the reaction button, let's give Chris a huge round of applause. Whole bunch of hearts his way and the RTF's way. We are super duper team RTF over here. Chris, for the second year in a row, thank you for joining. We're going to get into action the next 2 days, and we're going to start marching closer to that 50K goal. We'll see if we can do it. But Chris, thank you for joining. Thank you all for day one of Rejection Con. That closes it out. If you're still working, tell them Wes said you can take the rest of the day off, because you got to rest. You gotta recoup, and we gotta join back in. We'll same time about 12:30 Eastern tomorrow. Thank you all so very much.